Google News. We're gonna move into it. Now we're going to create some other things, some folders. If I type in ls, we'll see that we have our 3 folders. Let's go ahead and open up our code editor. And we can see that we have 3 folders, but no files. Okay, so now what do we need to do now? We need to create these files. So now we can see that we have the files here on the left. So let's go ahead and move our files into their appropriate folders. And let's go ahead and get our HTML5 rolling. Okay, we save it. Let's go ahead and start our server. Make sure that everything works. And we can see that we have a white screen. Dope. Okay, let's go ahead and link our CSS. Fix the path. Let's go ahead and open up the styles.css and let's smoke test. We're smoke testing. We're proving to make sure that this works. And we see that our background is red, so that our style has properly been loaded. Okay, now we need to perform the same logic except for our script tag. And we're also going to smoke test this, except we're going to throw in a console.log. Oops. Right now, I cannot determine whether or not this file is loaded correctly. We don't have any output that lets us know that, right? So we're just going to throw in a console.log, script file loaded. And then we see that in our console, we see script file loaded, okay? All right, so the objective of today is to build Google News. I'm going to create a UL and give it an ID of articles, article list. Okay, article list. We save it, and now we'll jump back over to our JavaScript, and we're going to define a function. Well, no, let's just think about the app. Okay, when the app first loads, what do we want to do? We want to get some news from them, right? But we don't have this function defined yet, so we're going to do that right here above it. Okay, so what do we do in this function? In this function, we need to call an API, parse the response, draw it on the screen. Okay, so we're going to call a fetch. And what do we call here? I don't know. So I'm going to look at the documentation. I'm going to newsapi.org. I'll look at the documentation. We'll look at top headlines. We can see that we have a URL right here. Can I copy this? Yeah. I can copy it right there. So we just go ahead and just hard code this bad boy. So now we can do const go equals, and let's just look at what go is. What do you guys expect to see here? Someone tell me an expectation. We can get some data. We're gonna get a date for Friday. What are we gonna get here? On line 4, guys.
You should get just the URL around what the data coming out of that URL.
It's a JSON object.
Yeah, an object.
That's what we want to get, but we're going to get a promise. Did I just prove that we got a promise right here? Remember, today's objective, the only thing that we knew that you guys need to learn today is how to call an API correctly. Okay, everything else we've done before. We've mapped over before, we've done JavaScript before, HTML before, CSS before, Bootstrap before. The objective of today is to understand how to call an API. So right now, this does not work. The reason why this does not work is because fetch is a synchronous request. It needs to take some time, so we need to say that is async. So inside of ES6, we throw the async up here, okay? We throw it up here on the right-hand side of the expression before the function assignment, okay? And then before the fetch, we do await. Should this work now, guys? It does in fact work, okay? But now you guys will do const go again, and we'll say go.json. If we console log go again, what should we see? What should we see, guys?
Promise.
And we do in fact see a promise. Okay? Let's go stick this right here. So notice that the first time we console log, we did get an object that we could work with, but the second time we console logged on line 5, we did not get an object we could work with. It's a promise. So once again, what I said, this is something you have to memorize. There's no other solution other than memorizing this, okay? So we do await in front of it. And now you guys can see that we get an object that we can manipulate right here. Okay, here's an object, we can expand it, we can close it, etc. Okay, so at this point we've gotten our data, right? We've proven it by looking at console. Let's go ahead and refactor a little bit. So the reality is that on line 2, we're getting a response. So we'll just go ahead and call this something correct. And then inside of here, we got some data. That's what we really have. So what we can do is we can just say, now that we have our data, which key are we interested in, guys? Which key are we interested in? Yes. So I'm going to give you a piece of advice right now. I want you to just leave one console.logged. Just leave it there. Don't remove it, so that you can always have access to an individual object to look at, okay? So at this point, we know that we have the data, and we know the shape of our data. We know what the key looks like, what the keys are named, what values are inside of them. So we can now call render news. We're just going to pass them the data.articles. So obviously render news is going to be what? What's it going to do, guys? It's going to render some HTML. That's why I'm telling you that this is not a pattern I chose. I'm telling you one day when you guys move on to other bigger and badder things in this class, you're going to run across a function that it says render. And you should understand that it's going to produce some HTML. I'm trying to advise you that in advance. So we're going to define a function called render news. There we go. All it is a function that's called render news. It's going to be passed what? When we call it, it's going to be passed articles. We do it right here on line 5. We're passing it the articles. So what do we need to do now? Articles.map. And then we're going to do what? We're going to have an individual article every single time we map. And at this point, we need to return something. Now I'm going to do this very stupid at first, okay? To prove something to you guys, okay? I'm going to stick in an H1 and I'm just going to say, hello world, okay? Right? So when we map over this, this is not done, right? We produced some stuff right here, but we did not bookmark it, okay? So now we're going to define a new variable. We'll call it articles HTML, okay? Now let's just look at what articles HTML is. We look at it. What is articles HTML, guys? Why isn't it an array? Because it's an array because map will always return an array. Okay, map will always return an array. Think about it. This line right here on line 10 through 12, all this code that I see highlighted, I have highlighted right here, this code executed. When it finished running, what did it stick inside of articles HTML? One array. Okay? And this array is composed of what? It's composed of a bunch of strings that will return from line 11, from the body of our function, okay? So now, what do we need to do with articles.html? We need to find an element on our HTML, document.getElement by ID. Which element do we want to inject this into? Article list, correct. My inner HTML, we're just gonna stick this in there. Oops, article HTML, okay? So we're gonna save it, we jump back, oh my bad. I don't know where I'm at, hold on. And now you guys see that we have a bunch of hello worlds. But that's pretty fucking stupid, if you ask me. Why are we calling an API and just producing one string that's exactly the same? That is really quite stupid, okay? And this is the point where we say, okay, so how can we get this string on line 11 to behave more dynamically? And I'm gonna start very, very small. Let's just make sure the titles are correct. So when this string is being produced, we're just going to make sure that we ask the article for its age, its color. No. We're going to look at this thing, and we're going to say, oh, it's the title. So we look at the article, and we ask the article for its title. So we save it, we look back over here, and now you guys can see that we have a bunch of titles that are dynamically produced. How is this? Why is it dynamic? Because today, when we call this API, our list of articles is going to be different than tomorrow and the week after. So this is dynamically produced. Okay. All right. So this isn't really that sexy. Let's go ahead and add a div here, and then let's go ahead and I I don't like this formatting. Let's make this formatted correctly. Okay, we're gonna put a div. We're gonna put it in our article title. I don't know what else we have. Okay, I'm gonna comment out this line right here. What do we have? We have a description. Article.description. What else do we need again? I forgot.
You've got content, you've got source name,
Okay,
you've got URL.
description, content,
Yeah, that would be one.
and then author,
Source.name.
source.name. So we got a bunch of data in here, guys. We've got the title, we've got the description, we've got some content, we've got the author, we've got the source name, and
And date.
oh, and publish that. Yeah,
Publish it.
publish that. Okay, so you guys can see that our publish that looks like shit. Okay, so how can we fix this? The solution.
Moment. Time format?
We're going to format it using a library, guys. Okay, and the library is called moment.js. Okay, so we're gonna Google. You guys can see examples, and this is not the right thing. I'm gonna do Google moment CDN. Okay, so now we have moment CDN right here. We jump over, and I want you guys to scroll down to the one that just says moment.js right down here. Okay, some of these right here, they're called locales. They will make our library behave more sexy. Okay. Now that I think about it, you should get the one that says min. Min here means minified. Okay, it's like it's just smaller. It's a smaller file. So we're gonna copy it. We're gonna inject this into our HTML right there. We jump back, and we don't see anything different right here. Our date is still very difficult to understand. So I'm gonna show you what moment does. Okay, we can call moment. Right there. If we type in moment, we can see that because we imported it on line 15 on the left, we now have access to this function. If I were to comment out this line, refresh, and then type in moment, it's gonna say moment is not defined, right? And the reason why this is defined when I uncomment it is because we imported the library for consumption. So now we can type in moment, and you can see that it is in fact a function. So what was the original objective? I'm trying to show you what moment does. So we're gonna call moment, which is a function. When we call it, it will return us an object, okay? But when we call it, we need to pass it an argument. And the argument is gonna be this thing right here. So we're gonna stick it in a string. And once again, it returns the object to us. Inside of this object, we can call other additional methods. So watch what happens to this string right here. If we call from now, we will see that it will respond with 3 hours ago. If you guys look at the documentation, there are almost an infinite number of formats that you guys can call, okay? And almost an infinite number. It's just fucking crazy, to be honest with you. So you can see that one right here is called calendar. It's gonna say today at blah, 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 okay? So now we're just gonna jump back to our console. Where'd it go? And I decided, you know what? I'm gonna do, what's it called again? Calendar. Calendar. Did I spell that wrong?
Maybe you need an A sometimes.
So you guys can see that we call from now or calendar, the output is different. Okay, I hope you guys get a feel for what we just did right there. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna copy this line. Copy it. We're gonna jump back over to line 18. I'm gonna go ahead and just replace one of them. I'm gonna copy the line down, and then we're just gonna see what the difference is. Okay, except this time, instead of hard coding that string that we inject, passing it into moment when we call this function, what should we stick inside line 19? Correct. So now you guys are gonna observe that we have one date that is this really difficult to understand format right here, and then the one that is of the format that we want, right? This one is unreadable. I don't know what time that is, to be honest with you. I can tell you it's kind of like sometime October 9th, 2019. So anyway, that's how we get a human readable format. You guys can choose which one you guys want. I don't care. Just like I don't care what color you guys choose, but make it beautiful. Please spend some time to make it beautiful, okay? All right, so we got 2 dates, right? So we got our time ago working correctly, right? But now imagine that like our user is from Vietnam, okay? We're in America and we're building this app, but a bunch of people in Vietnam like our app. So we want this to work for Vietnamese people, okay? How can we do that? So I'm telling you right now that yes, this can be done. If you guys saw Bitna earlier, whenever she was looking at Google News, notice how her Google News was in Korean, right? And mine was in English. Why? Why? How does that work? How does that work? If we look at Google News, mine's is in English, yet hers was in Korean. The reason why this was occurring was because Google is smart enough. They had a bunch of good developers and they figured out how to do this. And I'm going to show you guys how to do this. So what you got to do is you got to call this thing called window. Call window.clientinformation.language. This will tell you what language the user is using. And we're going to use that right now. So we'll copy this. So in our script.js, at the very top, we're going to say, hey, if, okay, my bad. Const user language setting. Let's just say user language, okay? We're going to grab out this thing right here, okay? Then we're going to say, hey, if the user's language is equal to VI, then, now think about it, I'm just going to copy this code. Okay, we're going to find a function. This one right here, I'm going to give you guys the copy paste, okay? It's okay to copy paste in code sometimes. So basically, just understand that this code is a function. This function add script will be passed a language. When it is passed a language, it will create a new DOM element, and then it will stick that DOM element into the screen. Just like sometimes we inject HTML into the screen. Okay? We need to pass it a language, so it's going to dynamically send in a language based on the user's current language. Okay? So anyway, we're going to say, hey, if the user's current language is equal to VI, that means it's Vietnamese, then we're going to run add script, and then we're going to pass it a VI. Okay? So you guys notice that my language is still in English, right? Why is that? Exactly. That's exactly it. What Ed just said. Window that get client information.language. It's still in English because my computers are set to English. So how can we test this behavior? I'm going to jump over settings. I'm going to click advanced languages. Languages here. I'm going to move Vietnamese up to the top. Okay. Let's close this. Now we're going to test this behavior. I expect if this worked correctly 3 hours ago, we'll be in Vietnamese. Okay. So we refresh. And do we have Vietnamese here? Who here says that we have Vietnamese there? Okay, guys, that's how we do it. Obviously, this gets much more sophisticated. What Chinese? Which Korean? There's a whole bunch of different types of Spanish. Okay, and we need to do this more in a more sophisticated way. And I promise you that, like this right here, this thing that we do right here is very similar to the currency converter. Okay, if you guys want to make it work, I don't want you guys to make this work. I don't care actually. The objective of today's lesson is not to make this website work in every single language. We're just trying to show you that this can be done, and in fact, it is done. And this is how you can do it. Okay? We want you guys to know. And I want you guys to do it in one language. Guess what language? Vietnamese, man, what the fuck? Do it in Vietnamese first, okay? Most of you guys are Vietnamese. We're in Vietnam, come on. Just make it work for Vietnamese if a Vietnamese person loads the app. Okay, if a Vietnamese person who has their browser set to Vietnamese loads the app, I want it to show Vietnamese, okay? Start at home. Start solving it here first. One day when your CEO calls you and says that we're moving to China, we got 1 million users from China, then worry about China. Okay? But right now, just make it work in Vietnamese. And why do I want you to do it now? Because 1 month from now, 1 year from now, someone is going to ask you to make this work in a different language. And I want you guys to have an example of how you can do this. Okay? Because I'm not going to be available then. I don't know where I'm going to be. I might be available. I don't know. What I'm trying to say is I want you guys to be independent. I want you guys to know how to do this. I want if you guys go to a job interview and say, how can you do this? You're like, yeah, I can fucking do that. I've already done it. Okay, guys? All right. So what was the rest of the objectives? Okay, so we can see the 20 stories. Okay, let's go ahead and count. We need to do a couple more things. We're just going to say div count. Okay, so inside this count thing, we're going to inject however many articles that we have total, okay? So now we're going to say, okay, update render article count. We're going to call that function. Obviously, we don't have this defined yet. So we're going to define it. What is this going to do? It's going to say, hey, document dot get element by ID count dot inner HTML is equal to what? Articles dot length. Okay? We don't have something called articles yet, so we need to pass this in. And when we call a function, we're going to pass it in. That's all it is. So when we save it, we refresh, you guys will now see they have article count right here. Right there. Magic. Okay, so there's one more requirement. We're going to implement the fetching of more, where is it at? The user can click a link at the bottom and load the next articles. Okay, so how can we load it? I want you all to download this tool right now, or today. I don't know if I've already told you guys that. We're going to download a tool called Postman. Okay, and this tool is useful in testing our APIs. So we go over and we can see that remember that inside of an API, right? After this question mark, we have key value pairs. These key value pairs will make our API behave dynamically just like a function. The one that we need to make work now is called page. Page equals, okay? So for example, you guys can see that on this API, our page is equal to 1. If we click send and we look at it, you guys will see that we have 38 total articles right here. What's the first article? What's the first article, guys?
Joshua Belling, advertising, you can see it there, right around the store.
Okay, so if we call it again, look at this number right here, it's 1. If we do it with number 2 instead, the first one is supposed to not be that, right? If we call it again, what's our first article now? Okay, so I've proven you that we call the same article twice, but a page number will give you different results. So how can we do that here? So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna say, hey, when our app first loads, we're gonna have a number and we're gonna call it page num. We're gonna set it equal to 1, okay? So this string here that we send into fetch, we're gonna dynamically produce this. We're gonna say page is equal to, I can't read this. Is this too small? Can you guys not read this?
I can read that one picture.
So we're gonna say and page is equal to what? Some string concatenated page numbers, okay? At the very end of this function, we're just gonna kick up that number. So my expectation is that when the first time this loads, or my expectation is that this thing right here will be 1 and then it will become 2 on line 24 through on line 26. Okay, we're gonna call the page number. We're gonna call the API with page number 1, and then on line 25 we kick it up by 1. So let's jump back. Is that the behavior we observe? Yes, it is in fact the behavior we observe. So now the question becomes, how can we get this request to fire again? So how do we get request to fire? How can we get a function to execute, guys?
To run it somewhere, call it somewhere.
Okay, how can we call it? How can we get this in the user? Are we gonna ask the user to open up their console and then just call it? No? No? Come on, let's just do that. We can get it working, right? Come on, let's just do it. We can do it, right? What are we gonna do, guys? What did you just say, Ed?
You're gonna put a button in.
Yes, guys, we need a button. Okay? So now we're gonna do a button. We're gonna add an on click. And then we're gonna do get news. Get more. This is gonna produce a new problem. Okay? Watch. So our first article is what? Houston Rockets fan, right? I'm gonna copy this and paste it at the very top, okay? The first article is Houston Rockets something, right? Paste it right there. We're gonna scroll down, we're gonna click this button, and we scroll all the way back up. Where the Houston Rockets go? If we do Command F, we do not have it. What happened?
Pushed it out. You only want to display the models.
Say again?
You only want to display the stuff on the second page, that page out, not the first page.
No, so there are many ways to implementing this, right? So right now the problem was that we took all of our old articles and we threw them away, okay? But on Facebook, for example, I scroll down, right? If I go back up, I still expect to see the original posts, right? So the problem is that when we click that button, notice how this thing became 18. See the number right there? What happened is that we got the original 20 articles. When we clicked the button again, we did all that logic again. We produced that same logic, right? And then once we get that new data, we threw away all of our old articles and we stuck in the new ones. So how can we fix that? So now we're gonna do some magic, and this magic is called JavaScript. So let's just say that we have two arrays. Okay, const first equals const second equals. How can we produce one array that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? And that is it. We're going to concat second. So we take an array, we concatenate it with a second array. So concatenate right here, concatenate. This just means combined. Okay, this is a fancy word for combine. So what I can tell you right now is inside of our script, when we render these articles right here, we're gonna say we need to have a new one. We say let news articles equals this array, and then when we get the data back from our API, right, we're gonna say news articles.concat what data.articles, and then we're gonna say news articles is equal to that. Okay. So now when we call these two other functions right here, my bad. When we call these two functions right here, we're gonna pass it the news articles. We throw away this, throw away this, throw away this. Now my expectation is that when we click that button at the very bottom, we should still see Houston Rockets at the very bottom, and we should see 20 jump up to 38. Okay, so we scroll down, we scroll down, we scroll down, we click the button, do Command F, Houston Rockets, and we still see the Houston Rockets, as well as the 18 plus 20 original articles. So 18 plus 20, 38. Okay, so that was a quick walkthrough, 27 minutes, guys. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, so we completed, the user can see the latest 20 articles loaded dynamically from an API. User can see headline, source, link, and image. I didn't do images, okay? Did I? I didn't. But if you guys can't do that, I'm gonna be very upset. Lastly, we showed the users, not lastly, but we also showed the users how many stories are currently being shown. The next thing we did was we said, hey, if they scroll to the bottom of the page, let's load the next 20 articles. The page should not refresh, and the stories should be added to the bottom. The stories need to be added to the bottom, okay? We don't want to throw away the previous articles. We want to keep the previous articles and combine them with our new articles. A user should see an updated number of stories that are currently shown. Is that reflected here? Do we have 38 here? I expect yes. Okay, and then lastly, the user should see how long ago the story was published in a human readable format. We not only did this, we also did this dynamically based on the user's language, okay? So I want you guys to know that that one of your instructors, Loy, is making sure you guys know a lot, okay? That's my job. I plan on doing a better job than my boss told me to do, okay? That's my goal in this class. I'm gonna do better than he asked me to do, okay? So we expect that required stories and optional stories are implemented when you guys submit your homework today, okay? Any questions, guys? All right, that's been a 30-minute lecture, 28 minutes. Guys, keep working.